The first launch of your course, your program, your membership, that does not tell you what the future potential of that particular offer is. Instead, it's about building a repeatable process that works for that offer and for your audience so that you can launch it a few times a year and reliably bring in profit each time that you launch it. Welcome to Imperfect Action. I'm Steph Taylor. For years, I read all the books, downloaded all the freebies, and did all the courses. But it wasn't until I started taking imperfect action that my business had its first $1 million year. Imperfect action is about doing things before you're ready, prioritizing consistent action over perfect action, and moving forward, even when you're not sure you're doing it right. On this show, you can expect mindset advice, actionable marketing tips, and strategies to build a business that brings you more profit, more freedom, and even more joy. Are you on the list to get my daily Biz Boosters? Every day, I'll send you a bite-sized prompt designed to help you grow your business in a more intentional way. Sign up at stephtaylor.co/DBB or at the link in the show notes. Hey, welcome back to Imperfect Action. This is episode 684. How to use the repeatable live launch framework to make more sales of your online courses, programs, memberships, or essentially any kind of digital product or online offer in your business. Now, big misconception that I'm going to start this episode by busting, and that is that launching your online course, membership, or program is about having a big launch the first time around. It's not about that first launch. The first launch of your course, your program, your membership, that does not tell you what the future potential of that particular offer is. Instead, it's about building a repeatable process that works for that offer and for your audience so that you can launch it a few times a year and reliably bring in profit each time that you launch it. So I'm going to run you through the 4 parts of the repeatable launch framework. Firstly, run the launch. So the very first time that you are launching it, you are going to actually go through the whole process of the launch from start to finish. Then the next step, once you've done the launch, is review it. Then refine it. So from the review, from looking at those numbers, from talking to the people who didn't buy, what changes do we need to make to improve it the next time around? And then we rinse and repeat. And you might repeat it twice a year like we do with Launch Magic, or you might repeat it 5 or 6 times really close together with the view of getting that sales process perfect so that you can automate it and then stop live launching it, like I did with my A to Z podcast launch plan, which the very first time I launched it, it brought in I think $2,000. So I'm going to share a little bit about how this repeatable launch framework took the A to Z podcast launch plan from that first small launch to more than 800,000 in sales in the space of 12 months. My audience was asking me to teach them how to launch a podcast. And so I thought, okay, cool. I'm going to put together a group program. I'm going to allow, if 10 people sign up, then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to launch this. I'm going to run it for this group. And in that launch, I only had 2 people sign up. And then on the one hand, I was like, this is useless. Nobody wants it. I don't want to do this. It was pretty embarrassing to then have to go back to those 2 people and refund them. But on the other hand, I also knew that this was still something my audience wanted because they had been asking me for it. So what I did was I closed doors on that launch. I refunded the 2 people who signed up, and I did the really scary thing. I reached out to the people who had said that they wanted to buy and didn't, and I asked them, why didn't you buy? And their answers told me everything that I needed to know. It was school holidays, so some people couldn't commit to live calls. Some people wanted to launch their podcast in 4 weeks, not 8. Some wanted to do it in 6 months, not 8 weeks. Some didn't want to do it in a small group format. They just wanted to do it in a self-paced format. And the big resounding takeaway was that they didn't want to do it in a group program format where they needed to show up to calls. They just wanted something that would tell them step by step, this is how you do your podcast. This is how you launch a podcast. So a week or 2 later, I launched again to the exact same email list, but this time I was launching a self-paced version of the program that I had previously tried launching. And I had, I think, 22 people sign up that time. So I created it, right? And that 22 people was like a $2,000 launch, just for context. And then I launched it again a couple of weeks later with a live webinar, and more people signed up. And I launched it again, this time to a cold audience. I ran some Facebook ads to get people who weren't on my email list to sign up for the webinar. So I launched it to them. And then again and again. And it was only when I was so confident that it was converting that I automated the entire sales process and I stopped live launching it. I plugged in Facebook ads into the automated webinar, and within 12 months, I had sold $800,000 worth of this course. From a first launch where nobody bought to a second launch where $2,000 worth of sales to then $800,000 in the space of 12 months. And launching is a repeatable sales process. You can do it again and again and again, each time bringing in more sales. Each launch is like an experiment. You learn so much from each launch by actually getting it out there and by failing, rather than sitting there planning, hoping that if you do enough planning, it's not going to fail. Now, the very first time that you are launching a brand new offer, most of your launch is going to be a guessing game. You can't be 100% sure what questions your audience is going to ask, or whether the messaging is going to land, or whether you've got the right bonuses. And the only way that you will ever find out whether you're on the right track or not is to put it out there and see what questions somebody asks, see if people will pay money for it. And then running those numbers for each step of your launch after you close doors to see what worked and what didn't work. And doing non-buyer research to find out why the people who didn't buy chose not to buy. And then you can tweak the messaging to address that the next time you launch. For example, if your non-buyer survey shows that people chose to not sign up because they couldn't attend those calls live, then you know that maybe your sales page didn't emphasize that they could submit their questions ahead of time and watch the recordings in their own time, right? That could be a tweak that you would make. Then the next time that you launch it, so you've done your first launch, then the second launch, you are now working with real insights from that previous launch. You now have real numbers that you can compare it to, and you can go at it with this attitude of, if we change this thing, how does this impact X number? For example, if we change these pre-webinar emails, how does that impact the percentage of people who show up live to the webinar? If we change this section of copy on the lead magnet download page, how does this impact the percentage of people who download the lead magnet? And because most of your launch assets are already done because you did them in the first launch, you've created this offer, you've created the lead magnet, you've created the sales page, all of the hard work is done, and you can now focus your time and energy on two things: making the necessary tweaks to improve your launch and growing your audience with more of the right people for this second launch. Because often all of the people who were going to buy in the first launch, they buy in the first launch. And then if you haven't grown your audience between the first launch and the second launch, you can have a bit of what I call the second launch slump. So you want to make sure that you're making the right tweaks and that you're growing your audience in between launches as well. And then you follow the framework again. You run the launch, you review it, you refine it, you rinse it, and you repeat it. And over time, what happens is you get better at launching this offer. You start to understand your audience better. Your content gets better. The launch starts to feel easier, more streamlined. It starts converting more reliably. And now you know that you can invest money into paid ads as a way to grow your email list for your launch, because you know that it's going to convert. You know it's going to generate a positive return on that investment. You're not just blindly pouring money into paid ads hoping that somebody might buy. And as you launch over and over again, your launches start to bring in bigger returns. They start to get more students signed up. And that is where traction starts to happen. But none of this can happen if you only launch it once and leave it at that. Okay, so coming back to that framework, it's run the launch, review it, refine it, rinse and repeat. Even if that first launch goes terribly, even if nobody signs up, there's still something that you can learn from that and try again. And it might just be that the messaging was completely off the mark. It didn't resonate with anybody, nobody wanted it. Great, rather than saying nobody wants this offer, nobody wants this offer in this way that I've communicated it. Maybe I need to do some more audience research, find out what would resonate with them, and make those shifts. But we don't know any of these things until we actually do that first launch. So if you're sitting on the fence, waiting to do enough planning, enough research, you're never going to do enough planning and enough research until you actually take that action, get that feedback, that real feedback from real people, and make those tweaks. All right, that is it for today's episode, a nice short one. If you've learned anything from this show so far, please take 30 seconds to leave a quick rating and a review. I read every single one of them. They mean a lot to me. And that is it for today's episode. Thanks so much for listening. Catch you next time.